Yes, the first one, that is the observational research, the most basic research design. We can say that it is the most basic research design that involves making observations of behavior and recording those observations in an objective manner. So, being observed and record the behaviors or recording the observations of people who are doing the work or working with the industries or organization or playing playing of the children and some of the social situations that being keenly observed, and these observations will be recorded in an objective manner. Although it is possible in some cases to use observational data to draw conclusions about the relationship between the variables. For example, we can say that by comparing the behaviors of older versus younger children on a playground, and in many cases the observational approach is used only to get a picture of what is happening to a given set of people at a time and how they are responding to the social situations. In this case, observational approach involves creating a type of snapshot of the current state of affairs. And this observational researchers plan will be having advantages and both disadvantages. And we can see that in the case of observational research, the situations will not be exactly like in a laboratory setting, but must be ready to make observations in a systematic way when such events are happening. In the case of observational research, uh, both laboratory setting and it can be their own unique setting will be observed. The observational research allows the study of unique situations that could not be created by the researcher. But in the situation of laboratory setting, the researcher will be arranged or created an situation to be watched or to be conduct the research with the person. The another advantage of social research is that the people whose behavior is being measured are doing the things they do every day, and in some cases they may not be even know that their behavior is being recorded. So they are not aware of they are being observed. So this can be done with an observational research. Then only the result will be good, that they are not knowing whether they are being observed by someone. So they will show their exact behavior into the situation. And despite their advantages, observational research design also have some limitations also. So most importantly, because the data that are collected in observation studies are only a description of the events that are occurring, they do not tell us anything about the relationship between different variables. However, it is exactly this question that correlational research and experimental research are designed to answer. So, observational research may not be observational research may not be fully given the exact result to the questions. So, for that, the correlational research and experimental research are designed for answering or summing up with the or giving more details than the observational research area. For that, psychologists, social psychologists are using these correlation research or experimental research to understand the relationship between the variables or the influences, etc. Another method it is used by the psychologist or people to understand the behavior of the person, that is case study. you may be familiar with this word or the methods that will be using in psychology, that is case studies. So even in social psychology also case study will be used. So in a case study, a researcher studies a subject in depth. The researcher collects data about the subject through interviews, direct observation, as we said before, uh, systematic observations, and the other one is psychological testing or psychological assessment or examination of documents and records about the subject. So case study is a better or best psychological assessment which are doing by the doing by the psychologist or a researcher studying about a person in their, or a participant or a subject in deep knowledge. So he may be collecting the data by using the interview methods, or they'll be using some, as we said like before, observation can be done, and they'll be using some of the tools or questionnaires or schedules to, or some ability test like psychological testing can be done, or the documents which are within the whatever they have brought to the clinic, or what brought they have collected as a secondary data and records about the subject also. Yes, the another method that we are very familiar with, this method called survey method. So we are very familiar with this method. A survey is a way of getting information about a specific type of behavior, experience, or event. When using this method, the researchers give people questionnaires or interview them to obtain the information. So, in the case of a survey method, they will be prepared with some of the questions, or that is, they will be having some schedules with them, and we have to give answer, or the people have to give the answer for the question which are being asked in the questionnaires, or they may be doing the direct interview with the people to collect or to obtain the information from the persons. And a survey is a data collection tool used to gather information about individuals, and surveys are commonly used in psychological research to collect self-report data from study participants. It can be done. So it is a self reporting system that the subject have to fill out the survey forms to understand about themselves. And say survey can be administered in a couple of different ways. In one method known as it can be done it as in the form of interview, and the researcher asks each participant the questions sometimes. In the other method known as we have already discussed, that is a questionnaire, and the participant fills out the survey by his or her own way, sometimes by filling by their own. Then the survey are generally standardized to ensure that they have reliability and validity, and this questionnaire should be standardized. So standardization is also important so that the results can be generalized to the larger population. When we are conducting a survey, that should be standardized, and if it is standardized, it can be generalized to a larger number of population automatically. And when the subject fills out the survey by themselves, then we can call that data as self report. And self report data can be misleading because subjects may be doing some of the following things that we have mentioned here. That is the first one, if they are doing it by themselves, it can be leading into some of the problems. So they will be lie intentionally to make some of the convincing ideas and give answers based on wishful thinking rather than the exact one or truthness. And the other one is fail to understand the question the survey asks. So they may not be understand what the surveyor asks if they are doing it by themselves as a self report data. So these are the problems which can be happen if it or it will be misleading to the area. The next method in social psychology that we are using it as known as correlation. So it is a method of research in which a scientific systematically observes two or more variables to determine whether changes in one are accompanied by changes in the other. So correlation is one of the method that we are using in the statistical analysis to find out whether there is any relationship between two variables in the research, two psychological variables in the research. So whether it is having making any changes if one of the variable gets changed or any of the variation happens with one variable, so whether it is influencing or whether it is making any changes in the another variable that is accompanied with the other variable. So it is a method that we are using in the research area. So a statistic known as the Pearson correlation coefficient is normally used to summarize the association or correlation between two variables. So the statistic known for this correlation is Pearson correlation coefficient, and it is being symbolized or it is represented by the small letter r. Okay, and this indicates the Pearson correlation coefficient of correlation, and it ranges from this Pearson correlation coefficient can ranges from -1 to +1. So this is the range for correlation or range for relation to be mentioned by this uh, Pearson correlation coefficient. That is -1 in between. You can see that -1 to +1 in between there exists 0. Okay, so -1 to 0, this area indicates that a negative relationship between this area plus -1 to 0, this area indicates that there is a negative relationship between these two variables if you are getting a value between -1 and 0, and if it moves to -1, so it indicating that there is a very strong relationship, there is a very strong negative relationship between the variables, and the other side to 0 to +1. So this area 0 to +1 area indicates that there is a positive relationship, but when it moves to +1 from 0 to +1, so if we are getting a value of +1, it indicates that there is a very strong positive relationship between these two variables. So this is the method called correlation. The other method used in the area of social research or social psychology, that is the interview method. So it is a commonly used technique by the psychologist or social psychologist or clinical psychologist, and in every field you can see this type of method can be used for the research purpose. So that is the interview method. So interview is used widely to supplement and extend our knowledge about individuals' thought, feelings and behavior, meanings, interpretations, etc. So through this interview we can know about the individual's thoughts, feelings and behaviors, and we can also interpret the behavior of that person. So the interviewer collects detailed personal information from individuals, usually in one-to-one situation using oral questions. So that we know that the interview method can be conducted through the orally, that is being asking questions to the participant or questions to the subject or questions to the client. So it is being conducted in an oral questions, and it will help the researcher, or it will help the clinician or physician to understand the situation of the person. So there are two categories of interview. There are two methods of interview, that is structured interview and unstructured interview. This interview method can be done in various methods. Structured interviews are conducted in various methods or various mode of various types or modes, that is face to face, by telephone, and by video phone, and by the internet. So structured interviews can be conducted in these mode, that is face to face interview, that is direct interview, or by interview can be done through a telephone, and by video call or video phone we can conduct the interviews, and also by the mode of internet. And there are three type of structured interview we can see, that is the first one is the structured interview itself, and semi structured interview, and the clinical interview. So these are the type of three type of structured interview that we can see. So we'll discuss one by one. So this can be done, or this classification of structured interview can be done or by defined by their degree of structure of the questionnaire should have, or the interview method should have. And the first one, whatever we said, is structured interview, and this type of interview is always associated with the survey style of research, where a standard interview schedule is designed to answer a series of specific questions on a face to face basis, and this interview structure will produce a quantitative data for analysis. So this type of this structured interview is always associated with or always in the mode of survey style. The research will be conducted, or the data will be conducted in the mode of the data will be collected, or the research will be conducted in the form of a survey style, and there will be a schedule, or schedule is designed to answer a series of specific questions. There will be existing some of the specific question will be with the schedule or with the questionnaire, that only that question should be answered by the participant or subject, or only that question should be asked by the researcher, not deviate from this structured questionnaire. So that is why it is called a structured interview. The other type of interview method, that is semi structured interview. So interviews of this nature, that is semi structured interview, there will have some specified questions in the questionnaire or the schedule, but will allow more to see clarification and elaboration in detail. So there is there is a need, or there is we can see that clarification and elaboration of or from the side of a participant as well as from the side of researcher, there will be some detailed information can be done in the case of semi structured interview. That is the questionnaire, from the questionnaire they can deviate from asking some other questions rather than existing with the questionnaires. That is the other method, that is clinical interview. So before that, there is one other method of interview called unstructured interview, that is there is no structure that can be done with the interview method. So whatever the researcher want to ask, they can ask. The question will not be in a structured manner or in the semi structured manner. And the other one is the clinical interview. So the clinical interview is a dialogue between the psychologist and the patient or the subject, that is designed to help the psychologist diagnose and plan treatment for the patient. So clinical interview can be done in these methods, like it can be done with the structured interview, and it can be done with the semi structured interview also. There should be some specific questions to be asked. There should be some specific questions to be asked by the researcher or by the psychologist to the client or to the subject, and he can also deviate from the questions which is not present with the schedule or which is already there in the questionnaire also. So they can ask the questions according to the situation and can move on, and it will helps. That's why it is said that it is a dialogue between the psychologist and patient, that it helps the psychologist to diagnose and make a plan for the treatment for the patient or for the subject. So it is a tool that helps, that is clinical interview, that is a tool which helps the physicians or psychologists and researchers make an accurate diagnosis of a variety of mental illness.